First of all, thank you very much for all of you that have come in to attend it and put in the effort and spoken and given advice and helped and everything. It's absolutely phenomenal, and for me to see so many people here, I think it's fantastic. It's a testament to what we're doing, what we're trying to achieve. I just want to sort of, we'll have some ground rules. If anybody's going to speak about anything that's personal to them, if they come, no one has to, but if anybody does, I think as the saying goes, we're all adults and let's just treat it like that. And if anything is said or if any emotions are brought out or anybody, let's just keep it here and let's be adults about it. So first of all, before I start, it's Vincent Montgomery, who's the author of that book at the back as well. He's become a friend and a colleague for many, many years that I've got to know through my life and my struggles, my upbringings, my learnings, etc. Vince has been through pretty much exactly the same sorts of things, but very much on the different end of the scale to the scale of life that I've been living. You'll see later as we talk, you'll see the differences in our lives. I understand myself and the trials and tribulations of life that I've been through as well, and how I've learned to cope with stress, anxiety, post-traumatic stress, etc. And the things I've learned along the way, just the little hints and tips. I don't have all the answers, I never have, although when I was a youngster you probably thought I might have had all the answers to everything in life, but we continue to grow and learn every single day. But a major part of my learning was through just when I left the police force, when I was forced to leave the police force after being shot on duty, and then a very, very big part of it was in meeting Vince when I first came to the United Kingdom. So don't feel obliged to put your hands up here, but if I can just get a brief show of hands, if any of us in this room know anybody that's been in a mental institution before? Okay, very good. Any of us know anybody that's been in a mental hospital before? And under mental or psychotherapy of some thought? Okay. I'll tell you now, I'm one of them. Okay. I was a policeman for my sins for 10 years in quite a politically diverse and tense country, South Africa, as we all know it. But my journey began a long time before that, when I was born, and in understanding my psychology, understanding my reactions, and understanding my stubbornness, why I felt sad for certain things, etc. It was in speaking to Vince, and it's all about the whole. Vince will go into it, and I don't want to undersell what he knows and what he's learned, but it's helped me understand myself, and it's helped me understand why I've gone through some of the trials and tribulations that I have. And generally, in a nutshell, it's your first 7 years of your life that dictates how you're going to react to situations throughout your life. And it's only since understanding all of that and receiving 2 years of psychotherapy myself. I was under a clinical psychologist and a clinical psychiatrist after being in the police. The police, as you would imagine in South Africa, it's very different to here. I definitely bear many scars, and excuse me if I do well up, but I bear many scars from that. I've laid many people to rest. I've witnessed a lot of gruesome stuff. I've dealt with the worst in society. I've had to put the worst of society behind bars, and I've had to watch the worst of society walk away smiling at me in court knowing they've got off with a case. That's something that sits deep inside me. I also lost 2 police dogs. If it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be standing here today. They were also shot in an ambush. So the reason I'm telling you this story, I don't want you to feel sorry for me. That's not what it's about. But what I'm wanting to hopefully get to you guys is we can overcome things if we talk about it, we speak to people. If we just, everything I believe we can overcome. Nothing lasts forever. Let's talk about it, let's share our difficulties. I want you to understand that, yes, it's probably cliche if I say, if I can get over it, you all can, because we all got different personalities, we all react differently. But what I'm trying to show you and try and normalize it, if that's the correct word, we all suffer from stress, we all suffer from anxiety, depression, and some of us have very different forms. I still suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, but through growing, I've learned how to understand, I've learned the triggers, I've understand things to avoid and how I cope with that and how I avoid certain situations. So I don't want to talk too much because I want Vince to come in and do the punchy bit. So, if I explain to you where my life started, way back in 1973, then I'm giving away my age. Back in what was then Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe, was a war. I was born in a war. I can remember as clear as daylight. We had a big police station across the road. I never saw my dad. Well, I saw my dad every sort of 3 months. And I remember bombs going off next to our house on the farm, and us all huddling into the corridors and that. So that set in play. And I was a young little kiddie, barefoot kiddie. So that, I didn't know then, but that set in play how I grew up. Okay. I'm also dyslexic. I didn't know that until I came to the United Kingdom, which also made me understand a lot of frustrations in school. Okay. School was the biggest inconvenience in my life. It got in the way of everything else I wanted to do. I loved my sport and I loved surfing, etc. Back in the days when I was at school, you used to get a hiding if you caught doing anything wrong, and I was always bunking off of school. But I've always been one for the underdog. I've always had that sort of that soft heart, that sort of try to sort of help people and push people through life. And if I look back to how my life's changed over the years, eventually I was expelled. When I went to school, I was expelled from 2 schools, believe it or not, and that was for fighting. Not because I was a thug, but because loads of my mates were geeks, as we know, and they used to get picked on at school. So I was a very good boxer in my days. I was a very good sportsman. So, well, why don't we deal with them that way? They're going to treat my friends like that. That was my answer to everything. Was fight fire with fire. And I remember my headmaster saying to me, very good headmaster, saying, Michael, he actually understood where I was coming from, but he said, we can't do this. We can't. That's not the way we challenge things in life. And he tried to talk me out of it. It was about 2 weeks later I got into another fight, so obviously I had to go. So we went to what we call, it's almost like a last chance school really, I suppose you guys would call it. But I was sent to an agricultural college. That's where I finished my schooling. And it was a school that really pulled me right. But the only thing with that was, when you're in an agricultural college, you've got to learn how to farm and all the aspects of farming, etc. Now bearing in mind in those days, I couldn't kill a bird or a budgie or a chicken or what have you, but part of agriculture, you learn to slaughter animals. And I remember sitting with tears in my eyes just when my teacher expected me to learn. This was all running into conflict with my natural personality. So that's how I started, I suppose, to become quite hard within life. Much to my parents' disgust, I then joined the police. My father's always asked for it. He said he wanted a refund from the agricultural college because he wanted me to become a farmer, and then I became a policeman. But I think being a policeman has taught me very much about myself and other people, and I'm glad, although I regret many parts of it, I'm glad I became a policeman because I know how to deal with people, and I know from all walks of life. And it's really helped me understand and empathize with people and understand myself. Obviously I was in the police, I was medically boarded, I was one of the youngest policemen to be boarded, and then I faced those 2 years of psychotherapy. That for me was a very difficult phase. One of the coping mechanisms, which is quite obvious to a lot of us, how did I cope with all my stress and anxiety? Alcohol. There were stages where I couldn't get to sleep unless I was absolutely bladdered out of my mind. Can't remember anything. And this, as I've grown to understand, it's just these things that you do to try and shut it out or to try and block it out. And these types of things weren't helping me because alcohol is poisoning your system. And then all that adrenaline that you've got from all those stresses, etc., is in your system. It's all poisoning you. So you're not really helping yourself recover by drinking alcohol in that fashion. So this, when I had to get into the old hospital ward, we call it the D ward, the depression ward. I was booked in there for 10 days. This is on 2 occasions for sleep therapy because I just wasn't sleeping after being shot. I just couldn't cope. And so I was booked in there for these 10 days, and I came out of that hospital feeling like I could walk through brick walls because I'd slept. You literally, they wake you up for breakfast, but you don't remember anything. So it was really sort of quite a healing process. And then, so that was sort of a real good chance that I could reinvent myself and start again. Cut a long story short, another incident happened, a mate that committed suicide, bang, I was back on the alcohol again. So I went back in a little while later after that for another 10 days. And that's been part of my growing. I then left South Africa because it was also quite a horrible environment. I just found it wasn't healing. It was quite a toxic environment for me to try and heal in. And it's almost, I'm not saying it's impossible, it's almost impossible if you're still in that environment the whole time. It's almost like something is spiraling out of control. So I left South Africa. Fortunately enough, I was given a contract to come play rugby up in Scotland. My coach, John Allen, he used to play for Scotland and South Africa. He arranged the contract, so very fortunate there. And then again, the following year in Cardiff, where I broke my neck. But I'd already started getting on that party train again. Rugby goes hand in hand, doesn't it? It's good fun. Got on the party train, broke my neck. So another 2 years in a full body brace with all those mental issues, trying to deal with it, feeling vulnerable, feeling sorry for myself, wishing why me, all that sorts of stuff. So through all of that, Hopefully I'm not making you feel so, but what I want to, from that, I want you to take, I'm here today. I am the person that I am. And it's through meeting people like Vince, you know, my colleagues at work are a fantastic team, and it's just the things we chat about. Just, it doesn't have to be a, let's have a psychology session, you know, it's just a hi, how are you, how are we doing, checking in on you, being able to be open, to be honest, to care about people's feelings. And that's what if anything we take away from today, I want you guys to really just take cognizance of what's happening in your team. You don't even make it an obvious sort of task, you know. Catch that person when they're on their own, or if you can just give your boss a nudge to say, listen, I think somebody's back in there, can we just give a bit of extra attention, or, you know, can we just watch them for a while? So basically, obviously my job, being a policeman, I naturally fell into investigating fraud, etc. And I worked in some incredibly toxic environments, and very fortunate enough to have worked in local authorities where I swore that I'd never ever go back into it again. When I joined Mazars, private sector company as well, I thought, okay, I don't need to go back into local authorities then. And that was probably, it was a strange environment. I met some good people, but also quite a toxic environment. And then I landed up here, because I came and worked for you guys. I did a job here once, and fortunately enough met Maggie, and she showed a bit of faith in me, faith and trust, and I'm here today because of that. And I think it's the best decision I've made. I'm the happiest I've ever been. I'm the most stress-free I've ever been. I really enjoy doing what I'm doing, and I enjoy the path that we're all on, and this whole network that we've created. You know, we all form some nice little groups, we all chat about it, we laugh about it. And I think what we're trying to do is normalize stress, depression, anxiety, and whatever, and just to make you guys realize, you look at all of us in this room, all of us suffer at some stage, okay? So before I go on to hand you over to Vince, I'm just going to, my tips for coping with anxiety and stress and depression is try and look at the situations you're in. Remove yourself from a situation that's bad for you. If you can, consciously try and remind yourself or remind your friend. If you can't remove yourself from that situation, remove that situation from your life. Always misery finds a friend, and you think you're coping when suddenly you're speaking to somebody else that's in the same state as mine as you. They're going to agree with you, aren't they? So try and find people that are quite strongly objective and will give you the proper advice, and be strong enough to take it. But be open, be honest. You're only going to get out of these sort of things what you put in, and how honest and open you are with these things. My friendship circle, and I've got some guys that I lived and died with on the battlefield out there, and I don't even socialise with some of them because of the environment that I grew up with them, and that to me was very toxic. So there's a few of them I don't even socialise with. My friendship circle, my trust circle's got quite small, but it's people that I trust. It's people that add value to my life. It's people that I can add value to. Often, I've got lots of friends, you know, I'll do anything for them, and I just found I was putting a lot of energy into everything for them, and I wasn't getting any energy back. I was just flat out, burnt out, stressed out, and I'm helping other people. I'm not taking time to sort of sort myself out. So remove yourself from toxic people, toxic situations, and just add people that add value to your life. And of course, the obvious one is try and avoid drink and drugs. I'm not saying I'm not prepared on that. I drink, I do. Well, we're just talking about it happened on the weekend. I drink, but I don't drink spirits. I try not to, because I know once I get on it, then I want to really get on it. So, you know, just manage that situation, manage yourself, and just think about, you know what alcohol does to you. You know how you're going to feel the next morning. I had a terrible hangover on Saturday because England beat the Kiwis, and I had to watch South Africa play against Wales. So it's those. I don't want to be one of these people that come and prefer, oh, alcohol's so bad, etc. But yes, we know it's bad. It's a suppressant, isn't it? So those types of things. Coffee, you'll be surprised as well. I live on coffee when I'm in this place. So it's just one of those things. Just listen to your coping mechanisms. Listen to yourself. Listen to your body. You know what your body can cope with. You know how to react. And be aware of your situation. Be aware of those things that are coming into you that are going to make you feel sad, depressed, angry, bitter. Chat to someone or remove yourself from that situation. Okay. Anybody got any questions for me? Feel free. Okay. I'm going to pass over to Vince straight away. Thank you.
A really bold statement. We are not who we think we are. And for around 95% of the time, our behaviour is pre-programmed or inherited. This goes unnoticed pretty much until we find ourselves in a stressful situation, because that's when the cracks can really start to appear. Believe it or not, we are programmed like a computer. We are basically regurgitating pre-installed programs. With mindfulness, we learn to observe these programs, and in time we can actually rewrite them. To make any sense of this, we need to look at the three main ways in which we're programmed. We receive our first installment when we're born. We are literally like a new computer installed with only the basic survival program. So nature needs to install a preparations for life program immediately. So for around the first 7 years, the mind that's normally there to analyse, create, filter and learn is dormant. So every experience goes directly into the subconscious mind and is stored as a new program. This is used when we automatically respond to a situation. So our earliest programming drives our automatic responses long before the mind has time to react. And it isn't a bad thing if your parents are loving, supportive and nurturing, because that promotes a positive interaction with the world. You just respond positively. But if, as in mine and many other cases, you were ill-treated, then your deepest programming will contain fear, anger and suspicion. And this tends to result in conflict rather than interaction. We also absorb trauma-based programs. Any of you have been through a trauma, you know you live with that for a long time. Anytime we're faced with trauma, we automatically trigger the stress response. And that closes down the conscious mind to make way for the much faster fight or flight response. And that will get us out there the quickest and most effective route possible. The downside to that is, as the mind is not there to analyse and filter, it allows that trauma to go directly into the subconscious mind and is stored as a new program. And like a computer, you get out exactly what you put in. And also like a computer, the subconscious has no concept of time. So if you open that program today, or you open it in 10 years' time, you get out and you revisit that event or trauma in its entirety. The subconscious believes and behaves you're going through that experience right now. So you get the full force of that. We can access this trauma in two ways. First, we have memory recall. And this can be literally like finding a hole in your tooth. When you find that memory, you can't help prodding it. So we can end up in a cycle of self-generated torment. And anyone, again, who's gone through trauma, you just keep revisiting it. Or we can unconsciously re-trigger the stress response. And that can happen at any time and in any place and can be completely unrelated to the situation we're in. So you could be meeting a deadline, sat down at a computer, or you could be at the checkout. If you're stressed, you have re-triggered that stress response, and that stuff can come rushing forward. This constant recall and re-trigger can result in post-traumatic stress syndrome. And I genuinely believe, on some level, more of us suffer from that than we actually realise. We don't realise that what's going on inside us is a result of trauma. The other way we're programmed is repetition. If we do the same thing over and over again, it gets passed from the short term into the long term memory. It then becomes automatic, so we can do it without having to think about it. But habits can be directly linked to childhood trauma or childhood programming, because our deepest urges come from our deepest programming. Our thoughts become our habits become our behaviour, and our behaviour ends up reaffirming our childhood programming. It's this habitual cycle that I found myself caught up in. For as long as I can remember, I'd be getting myself in all sorts of trouble. And eventually I was expelled from mainstream school. I started drinking really heavily at an early age. That was down to the environment I grew up in. I thought that was the way you coped. And as a result of that, I got myself in quite a lot of trouble, and also I got into violence. This continued until by my mid-30s. I'd been through the whole penal system. That's assessment centre, detention centre, what was then Borstal, and finally prison. Things took a real turn for the worse. My best friend lost his life after he got stabbed in a street fight. I really hit alcohol crazily hard then. And one night a friend and I went out and we attacked some policemen, and I found myself back in prison for 15 months. Drugs were really easy to get hold of then, so I jumped in with 2 feet. I took everything I could handle. And very shortly after my release, I just took everything. And there was nothing I wouldn't take. And when you're self-medicating, any of you that have done that and have access to that, You don't care, you'll get it from anywhere. I was even buying the drugs of a dying cancer patient, cooking them up and injecting them. I just didn't care. I didn't care what their situation was. It was about me self-medicating, and I was more important than everybody else. I ended up on heroin and found myself stumbling into addiction. Excuse me. And although it's hard, it really is hard, even for me, to believe. When I look back on it then, I didn't believe for 1 second I had a problem. I genuinely couldn't see that I had a problem. I thought everyone else was a problem. This is how I was coping. But even when I finally accepted that I had a problem, no matter how hard I tried to change, and I really did want to change, I just found myself slipping back into my old habits. I had no idea that this was a symptom of childhood trauma. And although mindfulness has played a massive part in turning my life around, without the help of some amazing people, I wouldn't be here today. You should never, and this is something Frosty said earlier, you should never underestimate the power you have to make a difference in somebody else's life. Just a kind word, just a 5 minutes with someone can make a massive difference to them. That happened to me, so I know how important that 5 minutes of someone not judging you, taking that time can really be. And never underestimate also the power that somebody else has to make a difference in your life. When you're struggling and you're suffering, someone will be there for you. You just have to have faith and be open to that when it comes. Unfortunately, so many of us are willing to help others, but we're unwilling to ask, or even when it comes, receive help. So we cause ourselves real problem. There's about being vulnerable sometimes, and you have to be. You have to open up. I had some amazing help and support from the people I met at Swindon College. Between them and mindfulness, they succeeded to do what the penal system fails to do in 89% of its cases. I thought that was a massive figure when I looked at that. 89% of people that offend go back and re-offend. They just keep there on that cycle. And I've been there, and there is no rehabilitation in prison. It doesn't happen. So they really need to, but it's money, I get that. I was compulsively getting myself in trouble, and mindfulness and help has now got me into a state where I've got a growing peace and stability. Deep inside I feel so peaceful. And although all of our experiences, they are going to be very different. We've all been born, so we all have subconscious programming. We all have habitual cycles of behaviour. And we all have automatic responses that are running the show for around 95% of the time. You think you're in control, but actually we're running on autopilot. This happens because the mind can't exist in the here and now. Anytime we're thinking, we are thinking of the past or we're thinking of the future. The mind loves to exist by reliving the past and fantasizing about the future based on the past. So that dread, it will put it in front of you and tell you that's what's going to happen, that's what you can expect. It loves doing it. So while the mind is flipping between the past and the future, our autopilot or our automatic responses steps in to take care of the present moment. And most of us have experienced that when we've travelled a familiar route. We've all driven a route, got to a destination and not remembered part of the journey. That's because you were deep in thought. You were focused on something else. So your automatic responses jumped in and took care of that present moment. And as we mentioned earlier, we are thinking for around 95% of the time. So 95% of our responses are automatic. What mindfulness does is it brings us into the here and now, so we can observe the activity of the mind as it arises. It creates a breathing space for us to assess the validity of the thoughts in relation to our current situation. It empowers us to start choosing the thoughts we listen to and the ones we disregard. Being mindful, we can start to consciously create positive thoughts, which over the time become habitual and eventually become our new programs. Mindfulness empowers us to make lasting changes in every aspect of our life. And you know when you're being mindful because you won't be thinking. If you're thinking, you're not being mindful. Or if you're observing your thoughts, if you're watching, observing those thoughts, you're being mindful. But when they're controlling you and you think you are your thoughts, you're not being mindful. Apart from the profound changes mindfulness has made to my life, it's first and foremost a spiritual practice. It gently awakens us to who and what we really are. And I spoke to thousands of people. And I certainly didn't know what I was. If we ask most people who they are, they come up with a name. It's not who you are. That's a tag you wear so people recognise you. It's not who you are. In the Western world, we are taught and we're encouraged to believe that we are our mind and its contents. In short, we actually think we are our thoughts. We're not. Mindfulness has a beautiful way of just dispelling that myth, and it opens us up to the realization that we're both multifaceted and multi-layered. And there comes a time, hopefully, in everyone's spiritual evolution, when we feel driven to go beyond the obvious of, I have a body driven by the mind, I have a mind driven by the subconscious. But what's driving the subconscious? What's behind that? Well, we start to get to our true essence, our true self, when we go beyond these layers. I can't recommend meditation highly enough. It's a wonderful way to start and finish a day in peace. And when practiced correctly and consistently, it dissolves the layers that separates us from our true self. We start to go back, and that's what religion actually means. It means yoke, to go back. You go back into yourself and past that as far as you can go. And you find the magic of who we really are. It definitely helps us to become more mindful. I've got to have a drink. And as we become more mindful, we learn to observe our own particular stresses as and when they arise. And again, we can bring ourselves back in the here and now so we're not affected by them. Most of us are really quick to judge ourselves, as quick as other people are to judge us. We're as quick to judge ourselves. But we do that without understanding why we act the way we do. We can try to understand that by going behind their behaviour, but that's searching inside yourself and finding out what drives that behaviour. And every time I've spoken to somebody, and certainly when you start your own journey, you realise we're souls struggling to come to peace with ourselves. If you change yourself for the better in the smallest way, you've made the world a slightly better place for everybody else. And if we apply that logic to everybody else, we won't be so quick to judge anybody else. We're so quick to judge. I've used my journey to compile that little workbook I stress-proof myself in a mindful way. It is very, very simple, but it is very effective if you trust it and you go through the exercises in there. It just makes you mindful. We've also created a little meditation chest strap for those that find it difficult to focus during meditation. Again, it's very simple, but it's very effective. For those of you who like to experience mindfulness, we've put together a 36 mindfulness audio session. And we're going to experience a little 5-minute of that here today, hopefully, if you'd like to. It's split into 3 parts, and you can look at the full thing or listen to the full thing on our website, www.stressproofmyself.com. It's freely available on the homepage. There's 3 videos on there, and it's the lowest of the 3. What's nice is if you do get stressed, and you've got that on your phone, you take yourself away, you plug that in just for 5 minutes, and it brings you right back into the here and now, gets you fully focused, and you hit that calm, empty space, and then you take that into the situation. You know, if we can start every situation from that calm, empty space, even when you do get nervous, even when you are a bit unsure, you've still got that base to sit from, you know, and that's what you take into your situation. If everyone does that, what a lovely place. My hope is that everybody gets into mindfulness and meditation, but at least some of you, I'd love to find out that some have started their mindfulness journey. Before we do that session, we've got about 15 minutes. So if there's anyone any questions at all on mindfulness or meditation or anything at all, in fact. No?
Any question? I mean, I know I left it sort of a bit wide open of when I spoke as well. But I didn't want to steal or take away from what Vince was saying, you know, about where our life started and why I started. So all of what I told you, I now understand, and I don't get frustrated, I don't get hurt, I don't get angry with myself, because I now know why my certain reactions were the way they were. I only got diagnosed with dyslexia very late on in life. So, you know, I hated authority, the authority hated me, and I was always challenging that, but I didn't realize there was a bit of a sort of a barrier in between that. But I now understand my whole life. Through that and through Vince, I understand a lot of things. I'm very much more mindful of everything I do these days. Yes, I still make mistakes. Yes, I step back into that dark world now and then. We all do, we're all going to.
But the more mindful we can become, the more conscious we can become, the better off we're going to be.
But as you meditate, you shut down the body. First and foremost, you isolate the body. That's your five senses. People talk about the sixth sense. We need to get into our sixth sense. Actually, you don't. It's the seventh sense, in my estimation. Because you've got your taste, touch, sight, sound, smell. You shut those down when you shut the body down, you go still. Then you've got your sixth sense, and that is the sense of who I am, the sense of self, which is the worst one. That's the hardest one to get around. So when you still the mind, so it shuts down. And then you go into this amazing space of stillness, of emptiness. And then you realise, meditation is different for everybody, but sometimes you'll get nothing. And sometimes you'll get this, like an audio conversation, and you can talk back. And it is like somebody else stood there talking to you, and you're listening, and you answer, and they talk. It's quite an amazing experience. And if anyone's had a near-death experience, I don't know if any of you have, but you see your whole life rush before you as if it's concertinaed up. It happens almost in a second and a half, but you see every single second of it, and you can question it, and by the time that second and a half is up, you understand your whole life. It's an amazing experience. It's peaceful as well. People worry about it. Absolutely not. No fear of death. It's so peaceful. So I started looking at nature to find out, am I nature? Am I creation expressing itself in a physical manifestation? Is that what am I? Are we all just a nature expressing itself and nature trying to understand itself? So this mathematical equation runs through the whole of nature. Go next one, Frosty. That's my wife's hands. Now you move the calipers further on, and you'll see they fall exactly in line with the joints again. Let's go to the next one. So I started looking at nature. I started looking at insects and animals, and I got out books and all that. And you can see Fibonacci's golden section working perfectly along the body and the ant. So the mathematical equation that the creation makes us with, it makes a tree, it makes an ant, it makes everything with the same equation. The next one, Bert. If you can start moving it around an insect or a human being. So the bodies is that to the large part, to the smaller part of the abdomen. Again, exactly the same measurement. If you go again, Frosty. If you move that up to the head, then from the base of the skull to the top of the skull to the eye, to the centre of the eye, is exactly the same measurement again. We go to the next one. Now I went into nature. Sorry, this should be
that one?
Yeah, and this is the number here. It's doubling the squares. So you get two inch squares. You double them. You put 4 next to that, 8, 16, 32, and away you go. And of course that looks 2D, but it's actually 3-dimensional. So if you look at a conch shell, you get that. If you look at that sort of weather system, the helix of your DNA, flowers, no matter what you look in the finger on your finger. That's the fingerprint of whatever you want to call God, male orientated. Because it's ego-driven. Look at the people we vote into power. We're the biggest egomaniacs on the planet. We do, come on, let's be honest. And look at the problem it's causing. When you go into a church, you go in for a door and the arch is like that. It's certainly the oldest cathedrals. And that represents a vulva. And when you went into the church, it was always domed. So you were going into the stomach of a pregnant woman. That's what this symbology was about. And then you would sit there and you would pray, you give up your sins, and you come out in absolute peace. You were being reborn. It was all geared towards us being reconnecting to our true nature. It was the greater, and we have to sacrifice our ego. We have to sacrifice who and what we think we are to get back to who we really are. Once you have that, there's that peace, that sense of peace and stability and strength. Because I can't be pulled off of who I am. I know who I am, I know why I am. I've got to pull that up now. Sorry, I've got a mouth like a torn pocket in a hurricane. I'll just keep going. So
It's just the nuts and bolts, but we'll get Vincent at a later stage in a month or two's time to do a proper talk, maybe on an away day, etc. And then I'll also do a little bit more and a little bit deeper, and hopefully encourage one or two of my colleagues to speak about their own circumstances and their journey in that. Have we got any questions or anything that anybody wants to know?
If you're caught unaware, all of a sudden an alarm bell goes and I've got to rush out the door. Of course, that's what it's there for. The conscious mind shuts down, the automatic responses jump in. So yes, absolutely. But the nice thing is, at one time you'd get caught up in that flow and you'd be gone. Whereas now, You do that, and you stop, wait a minute. And you can watch people rushing around you. I pull up to a traffic light, and it's red, but there's nobody there. The traffic lights are only there so people can cross safely. That's the only reason they're there. So a car will pull up, and the lights will be red, because that bulb happens to be a colour of red. No one will drive. Sit like drones, just waiting for that bulb to change colour. Oh, I can go now. It's all automatic programming. I just drive through it. And I shouldn't, but I do. It's like, because I understand the programming. If it was a zebra crossing, we'd just drive across it if nobody was there. Because of our programming, red bulb, stop. Now it's a green bulb. If I swap those bulbs over, would you drive? If I just swap the two over? Okay, let's go then. Everything we're taught to chase, to get value in. We're taught if we get the bigger house, the better car. You know, if you do well at school, you get this qualification. Then you can go out and get a job. If you do well at that job, you can get a promotion. If you do well at that, and then you can retire, and you have a decent retirement. And then you get into retirement. I haven't quite got there yet. I'm close, but you get into retirement, and I think you're saying, "What did I do? What was all this about? I got promised this whole thing, like this Santa Claus thing. If I was a good boy or a good girl, I can get this thing at the end of it." And none of us discover who we are. The best thing I've ever done is gone in instead of out. Once you go in and you find that lovely centre, that peace, you feel so solid, you feel so complete. We're all trying to complete ourselves by getting that car. When I get that car, I'll be happy. Get that car, yeah, but it wasn't quite what I thought. Someone scratched it now. Be happy when I get that house though. Get that house, yeah, but I can't afford the bills now. There's always something with the mind. It's never going to be happy, it's too fluid. So if we say, that's all, I have to live in a house, so I will do that. But the most important thing is, what's the most important part of a house? Is it the bricks and mortar, or is it the empty space inside? What's the most important part of a cup? Is it the shell, or is it the empty bit inside? The shell just contains the value. The value's inside. And that's the same as a human being.
Before we go, I just wanted to also thank Victor, which was quite a nice energy and enthusiasm to try and promote this agenda for us and get it out there. Definitely grow it and share it with the rest of us. So let's keep it up. So thank you very much, Victor. I really appreciate everything you've done. Okay.